All right, good afternoon, everyone. I really appreciate everyone coming here. We're heading into the home stretch of session, which brings joy to many and sorrow to maybe one or two in the state. But we're here today because, certainly I think most people would agree that one of the most important responsibilities of government is public safety. And New York certainly had its challenges in the last couple of years in that front in many different aspects. Every facet, basically, of criminal justice has seemingly been under attack and challenged. And certainly one of the cornerstones of our criminal justice system is our Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, DOCS. And there's been an awful lot of changes in our prisons in the last several years, and most of them not good. So we're here today specifically to talk about a bill that I put in the Senate, Senate Bill S-9378, which would repeal the HALT Act, which was adopted by the legislature in 2021. And I'll also put in that not a single member from my side of the aisle voted in the affirmative on that legislation. It's carried in the Assembly by Assemblymember Matt Simpson, and we'll be hearing from him shortly. Since HALT went into effect on April 1st, assaults have been up in our prison system 25%. A little bit of history, though, to give you a context of how we got here and where we've been. Over the last 10 years, we've eliminated 13,000 beds and closed 24 correctional facilities around the state. In 1999, prison population was 72,000, and today it's approximately 31,000, so less than half. What we've done is we have concentrated the worst of the worst into fewer facilities over the last few decades. The HALT bill was sold to the public by people that don't represent correctional facilities, and frankly, I would venture to say that the vast majority of the people that voted yes on HALT have never set foot in one of the state's correctional facilities, and I've been to many of them. There are several in my district. But it was sold as an anti-solitary confinement to somehow conjure up an image that we all have from Hollywood of Shawshank prison or Devil's Island, and some of these awful places with rats and dripping walls and just the horrors that we see on television and in the movies. But the truth be told, that we're talking about special housing units. And if you visit these facilities, special housing units look very much like the general prison population. They're the same size, they have the access to the same services, they're just segregated. They're segregated for a good reason, for a public safety reason, safety within these facilities reason. And it's a tool. The special housing unit is a behavioral tool for people that, by definition, the public, the court system has found have a difficulty controlling their behavior, which is why they're in prison. It's a tool that controls behavior. It sets up a system of consequences. Imagine life without consequences, what that would look like. And it's certainly about promoting safety of our staff as well as our incarcerated. And I emphasize that because it seems like a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle aren't concerned about safety or well-being of police or our correctional staff. They seem more concerned with criminals and the incarcerated. Well, if that's what lights your fire, then guess what? HALT is hurting the safety of the incarcerated as well. And this is an important tool, and I would say, I would liken this is like taking a tool away from corrections, the same as telling a carpenter to build a house and you can't use a hammer. We've seen a systematic attack on every aspect of our criminal justice system. In addition to HALT, there's a litany of them, and they affect parole, supervision, the court system, the police, ban the box, less is more, bail and discovery reform, raise the age, defund the police, coming soon to a legislature near you, clean slate. There's been talk about ending qualified immunity. Who in their right mind would want to be a police officer if you had to worry about losing your livelihood and your home because of a lawsuit and you weren't protected by your employer? And an overall anti-police rhetoric. This is what's been permeating from the other side of the aisle for years in New York State, and we are seeing the results of that. Crime has skyrocketed in New York State. Public safety has decreased. All you have to do is look at the statistics or open a newspaper and you'll see that's true. And people are leaving with their feet. And it isn't all for warmer climes in the South. They are leaving New York for other better opportunities, and that includes providing good public safety, a safe environment for their families. 300,000 people left in the course of a year, which is why we just lost another congressional seat. So all this that we're doing here, the attack on criminal justice, is playing into the direction that the state is going, and it's all as a result of one-party rule by the other side of the aisle that's brought all this to us. And everything that are listed has been done in the last few years, but today we're here to talk about repealing HALT, which would restore some much-needed public safety within our prison walls for both staff and the incarcerated. And certainly we're going to be hearing from some of our partners at DOCS and NYSCOPBA about some of the statistics and what their experiences have been. But with that said, I'd like to thank everyone for coming, all my colleagues for being here today, and I want to turn it over to our Senate Republican Conference leader, Senator Rob Orr. Senator, thank you.
Thanks, So I had some, thank you very much. I had some statistics, but Senator Steck sort of hit them all. So I'll just make some brief remarks. First of all, I want to thank my colleague Dan Steck for carrying this bill. It's very important that we continue this conversation. Whenever we pass a major change or reform, I don't care if it's criminal justice or otherwise, we should ask ourselves, is it working? And the statistics he just rattled off would tell you it's not working. Since it's passed, assaults in prison facilities are up 25%. That means our prisons, our correctional facilities, are less safe today as a result, partly, of HALT. Now, there were a lot of other reasons they were trending in a bad direction, which we've done nothing to fix, by the way. We haven't made sure that there's more corrections officers in these facilities, which is a big problem. We haven't made sure that there's more beds available. We haven't made sure that there's not overcrowding. And then we pass HALT on top of it. But whether it's bail, whether it's discovery, or whether it's HALT, the takeaway is the same. Our streets are less safe today because of policies passed by my colleagues across the aisle. Our prisons and correctional facilities are less safe today because of policies passed by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And no one sits there to say, are these working? Except for us. And we're going to continue to measure our colleagues' success on this by those statistics you just heard from Senator Steck. And I'll also add, there's a theory out there, I guess a metric that my colleagues across the aisle talk about, mass incarceration. We have to reduce mass incarceration. And I want to just sort of address this as if we're just rounding people up off the street and throwing them in jails. That is not what ever happened. That's not what's happening now. If you're in prison today in New York, you really did a lot of work to get there because it's really hard to end up there. That's the first thing. But the idea that I want less people in jail too. Senator Steck wants less people. Everyone up here wants less people in jail because that means to me, less people are committing crime. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle do not see the correlation between less crime and less people in jail. They just want less people in jail. However, we got to get there. Close the beds, close facilities, get more people on the street. Whether or not it's safer for everyone, that doesn't really matter. That doesn't really factor into the discussion. And to prove that point, you have folks who are here today from NYSCOPBA, corrections officers. No one ever asks them, how is this going to impact your job? We ask them to go do a job that most people do not want to do and have no idea what goes into it. Because thank God most people have never been inside a prison. But we ask these folks to go do a very difficult job. And we're making it more difficult, more dangerous. How are we going to attract more people to do that job? How are we going to tell them, we got your back, we're doing everything we can to make sure you're safe while doing a very dangerous job, inherently. They're not on the street trying to catch criminals. They are in a facility with convicted criminals. These are dangerous people, full stop, there's no debate. They're rapists, they're murderers, they're burglars, many of them multiple times. And we ask them to do the job, and yet we pass things like HALT, which takes away a tool. It takes away an option for them to keep not only themselves safe, but as Senator Steck pointed out, other incarcerated individuals. And that's important. That's important. If we're being honest, we should be trying to keep all those folks safe as well, and we're failing at that. So it is important that we continue this dialogue. It is important that Senator Steck carries the legislation in the Senate. and that my colleague in the Assembly, Assemblyman Simpson, carries this in his House. And I want to thank all of my colleagues for being here, and I want to thank our partners at NYSCOPBA for being here as well, and for continuing to advocate not only for their membership, but for those that they're entrusted to effectively police and protect in these facilities. So, Senator Steck, thank you very much. And I will turn it over now to my colleague in the Assembly, Assemblyman Matt Simpson. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Leader Orton. Thank you, Senator Steck. You know, I wish that I didn't have to stand here and report to you on the failures of the HALT Act that we passed last year. It's really a tragedy that we have to revisit this, that it didn't work. And after a year of us telling the governor, letting everyone know in the chamber that this isn't working, we get nothing in return. And I'm going to repeat some of those statistics because I think it's staggering. One of the most basic and fundamental tasks that our state is responsible for is the safety of its citizens, and this includes those working in our correctional facilities. Unfortunately, despite an inherently dangerous setting, the HALT Act has put our brave corrections officers in an increasingly violent environment that daily violates their health and safety. Since April 1st alone, overall violence has increased more than 30%. Inmate on staff violence has increased by 25%. Inmate on inmate violence has increased by 40%. Almost 40 inmates suffered violent attacks from fellow inmates the final week of April. Violence has increased 124% over the last decade, including an all-time high in 2021, despite the lowest prison population since 1984. We cannot, in good faith, expect these men and women to carry out an inherently difficult task and then strip them of the tools they need to fulfill their job. HALT has made our corrections facilities more dangerous and undermines the work of our COs. If the legislators who pushed this bill, and all the advocacy groups, though were sincere and serious about the health and wellness of New York's inmate population, they would see that the law doesn't align with their goals. Those statistics show it. Violence is violence. And quite frankly, New Yorkers are seeing far too much of this everywhere. How many more men and women need to be harmed before the legislature acts? We must do the right thing and repeal the dangerous HALT Act. I want to thank all my colleagues, thank all of you for being here, and we need to get this done immediately. Thank you.
We've got some representatives and members from NYSCOPBA that made the trip down here to Albany today, and I'd like to take this opportunity to ask and introduce President Mike Powers to offer a few words and their observations. Mike, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. A little stuffy in here today.
It is.
A lot of hot air downstairs, eh? At any rate, thank you, Senator Steck, for the introduction, Assemblyman Simpson, Leader Ort, and the conference, and everybody here that recognizes the inherent dangers of HALT and the recent implementation of it. It's really done nothing to improve the lives of the incarcerated individuals or the civilian or security staff in these facilities. And we've been very vocal about that in the previous years, addressing this to the legislature that we're promoting this bill. And we invited them, quite frankly, into the facilities, as Senator Steck and many behind me have entered into our correctional facilities and see the real value that we bring to it and the real programs that the department brings forward. You know, it severely limits our ability to maintain order in a significantly more violent atmosphere that we've dealt with in the past. And that comes with dangers to not just security staff, but to the incarcerated individuals as well. As many have mentioned, I'm going to share some stats with you as well, but going forward, just since the implementation of HALT in April, you know, we've seen vicious attacks on security staff. We had a very vicious, unprovoked attack on a correction officer in central New York over an individual who recently came out of the HALT program, was transferred to another facility. Within hours of his transfer into this facility, unprovoked, slashed an officer across the face, leaving him completely for the rest of his life scarred, not just physically, but mentally. Shortly thereafter, just last week, we have an active investigation with the state police and BCI at a correctional facility up north between two incarcerated individuals, where a vicious attack upon one and the other, and I mean vicious, created the death of an individual. We've been warning about these warning signs and these signals since HALT first started to make its way through the Assembly years ago. So those are some of the things that we're talking about when we're going forward. And these are the mechanisms that are not in place. There's no true deterrent. And I'll use an analogy that I continually use. It's no different than society, taking somebody, a violent offender in society, and removing them from society to maintain a safe society. It's the same concept inside our prisons and walls and our fences. It's the very same concept. It keeps the rehabilitation model moving, and it keeps the individuals that want to go through the rehabilitation program to become productive members of their society. A couple additional stats I want to share with you. Since the HALT enactment in April, prior years we've averaged 190 incidents in a month. And I'm talking in the last 6 years on the average, prior to April 1, 190 violent acts in our correctional facilities. The month of April brought 260 severe violent attacks. And we're not talking about pushing somebody to the ground or anything of that nature. We're talking about real, hard, vicious attacks on individuals, incarcerated individuals, and security staff. Ignoring violence doesn't make it go away. And we'll continue to impress upon the legislature to repeal HALT. This legislature needs to repeal HALT immediately. And we thank Senator Steck and the Republican conference in both houses in pushing to get this done, to maintain safety for all in the correctional setting. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And again, I want to thank you and your members of your team for both being here and your advocacy, but more importantly, on behalf of both houses, both conferences, for the important work and the dangerous work that you do each and every day. I know it's very stressful, and I just hate being a part of an institution that makes your job any more difficult than it already is.